You're a government employee, Laurel. My mother set down her coffee mug with the careful precision of someone placing a full stop at the end of an argument. Do you understand what that means at a table full of people who write seven-figure checks before noon? She picked up the wedding program from the kitchen counter, cream linen paper, Vanessa and Dominic's names engraved in gold across the front, and slid it toward me without handing it to me. A gesture that said, "Look, but understand this isn't yours." Dominic's investors are flying in from Vancouver and Hong Kong. His family has half of Bay Street coming to witness this. The last thing your sister needs is her little sister showing up in a red jacket talking about patrol shifts. I looked at the program. My name was not in it. Not in the family section, not in the bridal party listing, not anywhere. In a document meant to record the people who mattered on the most important day of my sister's life, I had been edited out entirely. I said nothing. I had learned, over 15 years of law enforcement work, that silence costs you less than the words you regret. My mother wasn't finished. She folded her hands on the counter, her French tip manicure perfect, her voice dropping into something that was almost kind, which is somehow worse than cruelty. Seth coaches minor hockey in Scarborough. That's lovely. It is. But these people, Dominic's circle, they don't understand that world. They'll ask him what he does, and he'll say high school teacher, and the conversation will stop, and your sister will be embarrassed in front of the people who decide whether Dominic's next deal closes or falls apart. She picked up her mug again. Stay home. It's one afternoon. The program was printed on linen paper thick enough to feel permanent. I reached out and pressed my thumb against the gold lettering of my sister's name. Then I pulled my hand back, stood up from the kitchen stool, and buttoned the top button of my jacket. I looked at my mother for a long moment, not with anger. Anger would have meant I still believed she could surprise me. "You've made yourself very clear," I said. "Congratulations on the wedding." I walked out. Seth was leaning against the passenger door of our hatchback in the driveway, hands in his jacket pockets, watching a pair of sparrows fight over something near the curb. He'd been waiting outside rather than come in. He always knew, without asking, when a room had crossed from difficult into something else entirely. He looked up when he heard the door, read whatever was on my face, opened the car door for me without saying a word. We drove home through the gray March light of Etobicoke. The radio played something quiet. I watched the houses go by, semi-detached, driveways with one car, windows with the blinds still half down from the morning, and I pressed my thumbnail hard into the pad of my index finger until the pain gave me something concrete to focus on. "She told you not to come," Seth said, not a question. "She told me not to come." He nodded once. His hands stayed easy on the wheel. Those hands, wide, rough at the knuckles, a 2-inch scar running across the back of his left, from where a skate blade had caught him breaking up a fight at one of his bantam practices in February. He'd gone to school on Monday morning without mentioning it, the cut bandaged under his marking hand. 3 of his grade 10 students sent him cards. One of them, a kid named Tyler who'd failed English twice and spent most of his time in the vice principal's office, had drawn a picture of Seth on the ice wearing a red cape. Seth never told me about the card. I found it folded in his jacket pocket by accident. He coached 3 nights a week in a rink so cold you could see your breath from the stands, on a community association budget that didn't cover new tape for the boards, for kids whose parents sometimes couldn't afford the registration fee and didn't know until Seth had quietly paid the gap himself. He didn't talk about it. He just went. Every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, through January and February, when the weather came in off the lake and froze the lock on the rink's back door. He made $68,000 a year before tax. He drove a 2014 hatchback with a crack in the rear bumper. He'd made the same coffee every morning for 6 years, 2 scoops of dark roast, a splash of 2%, and he had never once suggested we needed more than what we had. The night I asked him to marry me, I'd asked him, he'd laughed and said he'd been waiting for me to get around to it. We'd sat on the back steps of our rented duplex eating shawarma out of the foil, and I thought, this is the whole thing. This is actually it. My mother had attended our wedding with her chin lifted at the angle she reserved for situations she felt were beneath her. She left before the dancing started. I hadn't cried about any of it. Not then, not in the car today, not ever. I had learned very young that certain people interpret tears as leverage. My father had taught me that. He'd been a mechanic at a garage on Dundas Street West, the kind with a hand-painted sign and a hydraulic lift that groaned in the cold. He worked 6 days a week. His fingernails always had a rim of grease that soap couldn't fully reach, and I thought, as a child, that this was simply how hands were supposed to look. He taught me to read a dipstick and change a wiper blade and feel the road through the steering wheel when something wasn't right in the suspension. He told me you understand a machine the same way you understand a person, not by what they say, but by what they're doing when they think no one is watching. He died when I was 11. An aneurysm. He was standing at the lift in the shop, and then he wasn't. The paramedics said he was gone before anyone reached him. He left behind one thing specifically for me, a brass compass, the kind surveyors used to carry, with a hairline crack across the glass that didn't affect the needle. He'd had it since he was 22. He'd kept it in the breast pocket of his coveralls every single day he went to work. I had kept it in the breast pocket of every uniform I'd worn since the day I graduated from the RCMP training depot in Regina. My mother threw away every photograph of him within a year of his funeral. She told people at dinner parties that he'd been an engineer. That was the first lie she built the family on. It wasn't the last. 4 years before Vanessa's wedding, when I was working out of the RCMP's Integrated Financial Crime Unit in Ottawa, I was assigned to a task force that nobody discussed at dinner tables. A 3-province organized crime network had been moving money through Bay Street, clean, slow, almost invisible. We'd been building the case for 18 months. The operation had a name I will not repeat and a file number that is still, in part, sealed. What I can tell you is this. On a Wednesday night in November, I was in the lobby of a hotel on Slater Street when everything broke open at the wrong time. A man I recognized from surveillance photographs was standing 40 feet from me, and he was not supposed to be there. The principal we were protecting, a private Bay Street investor named Harold Ashton, a man whose name appeared in the business pages twice a year and at charity events slightly more often, had just stepped out of an elevator. The threat assessment we'd been given said low. The threat assessment was wrong. What followed lasted 11 minutes. I know because I counted my own pulse the entire time, the way they train you, the way it turns time from noise into data. I was told to hold a position. I did not hold it. I will not describe the 11 minutes in detail because some of it is still sealed and some of it is not the kind of thing you put into words without losing something in the translation. What I can say is that I stayed between Harold Ashton and a corridor for long enough that the situation resolved without the outcome everyone had feared. I had a bruised orbital socket and 3 cracked ribs for the next 6 weeks. I told my supervisor I'd been in a car accident. Ashton asked, before we parted in a service corridor off the lobby, whether there was anything he could do. I said no. I asked for the incident file to be sealed and any commendation to be declined. He looked at me for a moment the way people look at things they don't fully understand and then slowly begin to. I returned to Ottawa. I continued the case. I never spoke of it to anyone, not to Seth, not to my mother, not to anyone. My mother had spent those 4 years describing me to people as working in some kind of desk job with the government. She said it with a faint smile that implied the job was not worth examining further. She told Vanessa's fiancé, at a dinner they'd had in January, that I was a mid-level administrator who processed paperwork for officers in the field, that Seth and I lived on the edge of things because I lacked ambition and he lacked options. She had no idea. The morning of the wedding, Seth and I sat at our kitchen table in Etobicoke and drank coffee. Outside, the late March light was doing something soft over the neighbor's fence. A chickadee landed on the wire and left. Seth worked through a stack of grade 10 essays with a red pen, making notes in the margins that were longer than the comments most teachers bothered to write. I picked up the crossword and got to work. Around 2 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed, a message from Vanessa. No words, just a photo. The head table at the Windermere House Resort in Muskoka, the venue she'd sent a brochure for in December. 9 seats labeled with small folded cards. Our mother, Dominic's parents, his sister and her husband, 3 of Dominic's business partners from the Bay Street firm he'd founded. I was not there. Below the photo, a second message. Mum thought it would be simpler. Hope you understand. We'll celebrate with you separately, XO. I set the phone face down on the table. Seth looked up from his marking. He read the air between us the way he read the ice. Not what was being said out loud, but what was moving underneath it. He reached across the table without a word and put his hand over mine. We stayed like that for maybe 30 seconds. Then I picked the crossword back up. 4 letters, quiet strength, I wrote grit and moved on. I heard them before I saw them. A low, rolling sound of engines, not one vehicle but several, coordinated, moving in formation. Seth was at the sink rinsing mugs. He went still first, tilted his head, and I saw the moment it landed on him that this wasn't a delivery truck. He crossed to the front window in 2 strides, lifted the curtain, and turned back to face me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Laurel, his voice was very level. There are 6 RCMP cruisers on our street and a black sedan. I came to the window. 6 marked units, full lights but no sirens, had arranged themselves across our narrow Etobicoke street with the quiet efficiency of people who had planned this well in advance. Officers in formal dress, not patrol gear, formal dress, campaign hats, the full picture, stood in a line at the end of our front walk. Behind them, a man in a dark suit was already moving toward our door. I clasped my hands behind my back and breathed. In for 4, hold, out for 4. The body does not know the difference between what I'd faced in that Ottawa hotel corridor and whatever this was, and it didn't matter, because the drill doesn't change based on context. The man in the suit knocked. Seth opened the door. Corporal Fenner, he asked. My working name. Yes, I said from behind Seth. My name is Caulfield, Senior Liaison, Privy Council Office. He held up a laminated card I recognized immediately. Mr. Harold Ashton has requested your presence at an event currently in progress. He asked me to give you this. He extended a small folded note through the doorway. I opened it. The handwriting was deliberate, the kind that takes its time. Corporal Fenner, I've been waiting 4 years to say thank you properly. I understand if you decline, but I hope you won't. H. Ashton. Below that, in smaller writing, the operational file has been unsealed as of this morning, at my request. You'll understand why when you arrive. I looked at Caulfield. Where is the event? Muskoka, the Windermere House. A pause. There's a wedding reception currently underway. The timing settled in my chest like a stone dropped into cold water. I did not let anything cross my face. I turned to Seth. He was reading my expression with the same careful attention he gave his students' essays. Not rushing it, not filling in the blanks for me, just waiting for what was actually there. I need 10 minutes, I said. He nodded, one nod, the way he always did when he understood completely, and had decided to trust me with the rest of it. I went down the hall to the bedroom closet, pushed aside winter coats and Seth's hockey bag until my hands found the garment cover at the back. Stiff, zippered, undisturbed since the previous winter. I unzipped it slowly. The Red Serge, RCMP formal dress. Scarlet red jacket, the brown Sam Brown belt, the campaign hat, the lanyard, the boots, polished to a mirror finish. Every medal and commendation ribbon I'd earned in 15 years of service, pinned to the millimeter above the left breast pocket. The places I'd been, the prices I'd paid, the things I'd done that nobody in that Muskoka resort could begin to comprehend. I put it on piece by piece, the way you do when you need your hands to stay steady, methodically, without rushing, each clasp and buckle checked twice. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror when I was done. I did not look like the person my mother had described to Dominic's family. I did not look like the woman who had been erased from a wedding program that morning. The woman looking back at me had a jaw set like the lock on an evidence locker, and eyes that had learned, over 15 years, to give nothing away that wasn't deliberately offered. Seth was in the hallway when I came out, still in his weekend clothes, jeans, the old flannel he wore for marking days. He looked at me in the full Red Serge for a long moment without speaking. Then he stepped forward and straightened the campaign hat by 1 millimeter, stepped back. There she is, he said quietly. I kissed him once. Then I walked out the front door and down the path to the waiting convoy. The drive north on the 400 took 40 minutes with lights running. The city gave way to the Muskoka granite, and the dark spruce and the lakes beginning to appear between the trees, gray and enormous in the late afternoon light. I sat in the back of the sedan with the compass in my hand, running my thumb over the cracked glass, the needle doing exactly what it had always done. The Windermere House came into view at the end of a private lane, white clapboard and long porches, the lake behind it going orange and rose in the low sun, the parking area thick with vehicles that cost more than most Toronto mortgages. The convoy pulled onto the stone terrace where the reception was in full progress. I heard the glassware go quiet. I heard 200 conversations stop. I opened the car door and stepped out. The late sun caught the Red Serge and threw the brass fittings into hard relief. I clasped my hands behind my back, set my feet at shoulder width, and let my eyes move slowly across the terrace. I found my mother in 4 seconds. She was at the head table, 8 meters away, standing with a champagne flute held at the level of her sternum. The color drained from her face as though pulled from below. The hand holding the flute began to tremble. The glass did not fall, but it came close. Vanessa sat beside her in her wedding gown. She had gone so still, she looked like a detail in a photograph, her tiara listing slightly to one side, her perfect lipstick doing nothing to anchor the expression coming apart underneath it. Dominic, tall, even tan, the kind of tan that takes serious effort in this country in March, rose partway from his chair and then seemed to forget whether he intended to stand or sit. I let them look. I had earned the right to let them look. The slow, deliberate tap of a cane on stone reached me before I saw him. The crowd near the terrace entrance parted without anyone appearing to organize it, the way a room parts for something it recognizes without being able to fully name. Harold Ashton was 71 years old. He walked with a cane now, which he hadn't 4 years ago in the corridor off Slater Street, but his shoulders were straight and his eyes, when they found mine across 200 people and a string quartet with lowered bows, were as clear and settled as I remembered. He covered the distance between us without hurrying. When he reached me, he did not offer his hand. He placed both hands briefly on my shoulders, firmly, and then stepped back. His voice carried. I don't think he needed the terrace to be quiet, but it was. Corporal Laurel Fenner, he paused. 4 years ago in Ottawa, this officer stepped into a situation she had been ordered to avoid and kept me alive for 11 minutes when the mathematics strongly suggested she should not have survived doing so. She refused a financial reward. She declined a commendation. She asked for the file to be sealed, and she never spoke of it again. He turned slightly toward the assembled guests. I'm told by members of her family that she wasn't able to attend this wedding today. I'd like to correct that misunderstanding. He nodded once. An aide stepped forward and handed me a flat velvet case. Inside, on cream backing with my name engraved on the plate beneath, was the RCMP Commissioner's commendation for bravery. I closed the case. The silence held for 3 seconds. Then someone began to applaud. I could not tell who started it, and within seconds the whole terrace was on its feet, the kind of applause that doesn't build gradually but simply arrives, all at once, like a change in the weather. I stood in the middle of it with my hands clasped behind my back and my chin level. I did not smile. I did not look at my mother. I looked at the lake beyond the porch railing, the last light going flat on the water, and I let the moment exist without helping or hurrying it along. Ashton's aide directed my mother, Vanessa, and Dominic through a set of French doors into a private sitting room. I followed last, at my own pace. Ashton closed the door behind us. He turned to my mother with the unhurried authority of a man who had spent 50 years being the most important person in most rooms. He did not raise his voice. I met you at a fundraiser in January, he said. You told me your daughter, Corporal Fenner, was on assignment overseas and would be unable to attend this wedding. You told me she was a file clerk. He leaned forward slightly on his cane. You lied to me twice in the same conversation. I'd like to understand why. My mother's composure, extraordinary composure, built over 30 years of careful performance, cracked first at the edges. Her mouth opened, closed. I was only trying to protect her privacy. I didn't want anyone to... You didn't want your son-in-law's guests to ask questions about her, Ashton said. Because you've been describing her as something she is not. He turned to Dominic. Your wife's family took out a home equity line of credit, $240,000, in the 6 months before your engagement. The bulk of it funded the lifestyle your fiancé presented to you as established. He said it without drama, the way you state a number on a balance sheet. I didn't go looking for this. It came to me through the unsealing of this morning's operational file and certain financial connections that touched the case peripherally. I'm telling you now, because you have a right to the information. Dominic sat down very slowly into one of the chairs near the window. Vanessa looked at me. For a moment, I saw the girl I'd grown up with, before the pageants my mother had put her in, before the years of performance had fused so completely with the person underneath that I couldn't always tell where one ended and the other began. I saw the girl who'd taught me rummy in the back seat of my father's car, on the long drives to Sudbury to visit our grandparents, before he died and my mother began rewriting the story of who we were. I was not moved to rescue her. I was moved, in some compressed, distant way, to grieve for what that girl in the back seat might have become if someone had told the truth sooner. That is different from rescue. Ashton placed a hand briefly on my shoulder as he left the room. The door closed. Vanessa came to me first. Her gown rustled across the floor. She reached for my arm. Laurel, please, I need you to tell him there's context. There's things I haven't had the chance to explain yet. If you just say one thing to him. I stepped back, not with anger, with clarity. You told Dominic's family that you were sending me money, I said, that I couldn't manage on a government salary, that you were the responsible one, the generous one. She didn't deny it. That at least was honest. I understand why you did it, I said. Mum built the story and you learned to carry it. I know how that works. I kept my voice even and direct. But I'm not going to fix this for you. That's not something I can do. My mother said my name from across the room, just my name. The way she said it, quiet, nothing left to perform with, was the closest thing to honesty I had heard from her in 20 years. I turned. I know what I did. Her voice broke on the second word and she pressed one hand flat against her sternum. I know. I just need you to talk to him. One conversation. Whatever you think of me, your sister is. My sister made her choices, I said. So did you. I put the campaign hat back on, settled it level, and walked to the door. I stopped with my hand on the frame. You worked very hard to make me something to be ashamed of, I said. A desk clerk, a government employee, a woman who married a high school teacher. I looked at them both for one long, steady moment. The country decided that was wrong. I hope you find a way to live with having agreed with it for so long. I walked out. The terrace had settled back into something like a party. though quieter than before, with the charged quality of a room full of people who have witnessed something they will describe at dinner tables for years. Ashton caught my eye briefly from near the railing and nodded once. I declined the dinner invitation through Caulfield, shook 3 hands I didn't know, and then got into the sedan as the last light left the Muskoka sky. Seth was at the kitchen table when I got home. He hadn't gone anywhere. There was a pot of tea on the counter, not anything fancy, the same orange Pekoe in the orange box he'd been buying for as long as I'd known him, and 2 mugs, mine already poured. I came through the door in the full Red Serge, and he looked up from his marking. Something moved in his face, small and private, that I think was pride, though he would never have used that word for it. I took the campaign hat off and set it on the counter. I sat down across from him. I picked up the mug. The tea was exactly the right temperature. Outside, a streetcar passed on the avenue 2 blocks over, its bell faint through the double-pane glass. Seth reached across the table and moved a stack of essays aside to make room for my elbows. "Did it go the way it needed to go?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He nodded, picked up his red pen, went back to marking. I sat in the quiet of our kitchen, the one with the crooked cabinet door, and the tap that drips in the cold, and the window that sticks if you don't lift and push at the same time, and I understood, the way you understand things that live below the level of argument, that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The rest wrote itself in the weeks that followed. Dominic's lawyers filed for an annulment within the month. The agreement Vanessa had signed at a downtown Toronto notary in October contained a clause about material misrepresentation of financial standing, and it activated cleanly and completely. She would keep her personal belongings and very little else. The life she had performed her way into, piece by careful piece, was repossessed along with the credit lines that had built it. My mother's home equity loan came due. The private lender had no patience for anything except payment. The house sold in a market that was moving fast for sellers, which was the one mercy in all of it. She went to live with a friend from her book club in Burlington. She called me every Sunday evening for 3 months. I let it go to voicemail the first several times. Then I listened to one, and I understood that the apology inside it was real, genuine, halved open, without a request attached to it. I called her back. We did not repair everything. Some things, once they've happened, exist permanently in the space between 2 people, and you simply have to decide whether to stand on your respective sides or find some way to speak across the gap. We decided to speak. It is not easy. It is, I think, the correct decision. Vanessa and I have had 3 phone calls. They are awkward and important, and I expect they will continue to be both for a long time. On the Thursday after the wedding, I found a card tucked under the wiper blade of our hatchback in the driveway. No envelope. In Tyler's handwriting, Tyler from Seth's grade 10 class, recognizable by the way he forms his capital letters, it said, "Mr. Fenner told us about your job last week. My mom says you're the real deal. She says hi." Seth never mentioned having told them. When I asked, he looked mildly caught and said, "It seemed like context they should have." I have thought since then about what my father used to say at the end of a long day in the garage, wiping the grease from his hands, with the orange shop rag he kept tucked in his back pocket, the smell of hydraulic fluid and cold concrete floor still on everything around him. You understand a machine the same way you understand a person, not by what they say, by what they're doing when they think no one is watching. The compass is still in my breast pocket. The needle still points where it has always pointed. That's the whole of it.